Hello everyone, I am Ronan, and this is Wadsworth. Welcome to Now ZE HIR, weekly transition babble blog. Let's talk about crossplay. Crossplay is the concept in the cosplay community being the community of folks what like to dress up in the costumes of their favorite characters. Crossplay is the idea of wearing the costume and embodying the character of someone who is the opposite gender from you. You know, it follows the same sort of concept as cross-dressing. You're going across from male to female or female to male. And I recently had a resurgence of thinking about it after I went to Gen Con. And it was my first Gen Con, so I was flipping through that giant program book they have, and I noticed they had a specific crossplay contest that was scheduled separate from the cosplay contest. You know, the main big event style cosplay contest. Now, my first initial instinctual reaction was, well, it's a shame that these have to be two different events. You know, there seems to be this assumption in what I guess you could call mainstream cosplay. As mainstream as cosplay can possibly be, I don't think it could really be called mainstream in general. But when you go to the larger conventions and you see the more official cosplay contests and you see the people who are actually famous for being cosplayers, that's what I mean by mainstream. There definitely is an assumption that if you are going to cosplay a character, it is preferable to be doing a character that matches with your gender. Preferable in the sense that those costumes are more assumed to be taking part in the big events, and something like crossplay is considered less serious, perhaps, you know, has its own separate contest. And this is actually why my initial reaction of, well, that's a shame that it has to have its separate contest, I moved beyond that, because if crossplay is still being seen as less serious than, you know, sticking to a binary gender idea, then, you know, crossplayers can enter the contest, but they might be less likely to be recognized for their skills. And so, yeah, have your own separate contest. There are exceptions to that. I mean, I've seen some examples of incredibly screen-accurate costumes, incredibly screen-accurate, that would technically be considered crossplay because the person doing it identifies, you know, as male or female, and the costume is, you know, the other one. And those costumes would be very likely to impress people in the, for lack of a better term, mainstream cosplay culture. But the thing is, with those specific costumes, one of the assumed selling points is you can't tell that it's crossplay. The person is so convincingly pulling off the character, which can be a facet of so many things. It can be a facet of body type. It can be a question of how much of the body does the costume actually conceal, to the point where we just don't know and most people are going to assume. And then it becomes a thing of, well, I couldn't tell it was crossplay, therefore that makes it legitimate. So on the one hand, there is the issue of crossplay not being treated as a legitimate form of cosplay in the same way as sticking to your gender is. Taking that back further, it got me thinking about what even is crossplay to someone with a non-binary gender identity. I called it crossplay when I was, you know, in college and for the first time dressing up as Yue Kato from Angel Sanctuary, and was just at the very edge of discovering my own gender and my own self. But I sure as hell wouldn't call it that now. And I wouldn't call it crossplay to be cosplaying a female character either. Because even if I've adopted a lot of male language onto myself and my own life, A, that's not the whole story. B, there are many aspects of myself and my life in which I embrace the label of femme. C, I'm not going across to anything. So there's even less space for non-binary folks, genderqueer people, to enter into the legitimate cosplay world. I mean, I've always pretty much approached it as embodying a character. You know, not just taking on their costume, but studying their body language and their way of speech. And I've wound up using it as a tool, as one of the tools, sort of in my arsenal that allowed me to explore the question of how a male person or how several different types of male people might move through the world. And after a few years of being a cosplayer, I'm only just now getting to the point where I feel confident enough in my skills to start entering into things like contests. So that's why it's really only coming up now for me, this question of the mainstream idea of cosplay and what's considered legitimate. And it's really just another example of how the binary worms its way into everything that surrounds us. But I'm going to keep doing what I do, and I'm going to keep just diving into these characters, because that's the part that is really fulfilling for me. In addition to being able to make something with my hands in a sewing machine and being able to hold it and see the final result, being able to have people recognize you as the character and getting so excited about it, getting to meet other fans of the media that you are so in love with. I've always seen cosplay as an integral part of my fandom experience. I never went to a convention until I had a costume to wear to it. So it's very important and it's very personal for me, and that, at least, is not going to change. Thanks everybody for watching. You can find my cosplay work at Ronin Cosplays on Facebook, which I'll put, probably a little link right up here, or maybe on Wadsworth's face. Ready for your close-up? Everybody have a great week, and always be changing.